Welcome, you're in the field and I'm Derek Brook. I want to talk about antler point restrictions. I know I'll probably get a little bit of flack for my opinion on this.
I'll fix him for that.
But that's okay. I welcome all comments and all your thoughts and opinions. But I'm going to tell you today that I don't think they work as they intended to work, as they could work. I'm going to tell you why with these two examples here. Now I just want to be upfront, these are not realistic, these are illustrated examples of two extreme ends of the buck spectrum, and we'll get into that later. They're illustrations designed to enhance the differences I'm talking about, and differences you'd see in the wild, but maybe a little less obvious. So I just illustrated them to make them as obvious as possible, and also because when somebody's telling me something, I do better with visuals, so I hope these visuals help you. And to start with, I want to talk about I label deer differently from most people. I label them for first fall, second fall, third fall, and it's their first antlers, second antlers, and third antlers. And so first antlers and first fall, it's a 1-AF and a 2-AF and a 3-AF and a 4-AF. I just abbreviate it that way. Most people call it a yearling and a 1.5 and a 2.5 and a 3.5 and a 4.5-year-old. But when you get doing all these 4.5-year-olds and 2.5-year-olds, it's just a mouthful, and I find it easier to go 1-AF, 2-AF, 3-AF, 4-AF. That's my way of doing it, so don't let that confuse you. Just translate it. So these example bucks, I'll walk through them quick. So we have buck 1 up here, as young, first fall, 2-AF, 3-AF, 4-AF, as he gets older all the way down to 6-AF. And then we have the same, another buck, same thing, just side-by-side comparison year to year. And the first year, they're both button bucks. They're about the same. I mean, this one might have a slightly smaller body and slightly longer tines. And this one might have a slightly bigger body and slightly smaller buttons. They're buttons at this point. So how old do you think this deer is in this trail camera? Maybe it'll help if I put in a deer next to him. So this deer I estimate to be a 2-AF, and maybe you age him different. Tell me what you think he is, but he had the most beautiful basket 10-pointer. It was beautiful. And that deer, I never saw him again after, I think it was 4 days into the season. I had a picture of him, and I never saw him again. So somebody shot him, and fair enough, that's fine. I don't want to put down anyone who shoots smaller deer. That's their choice. I'm just saying, we'll get into that later. We'll get into that later, why the antler point restrictions don't work as intended. This 2-AF shows what the deer has potentially in tines. So there's a lot of thought on the genetics of deer, and there's some studies and some research that said that shooting nothing but the spikes wouldn't change the overall genetic makeup of the deer, and you wouldn't get more bigger bucks because you're shooting more smaller bucks. That it doesn't work that way, but I have trouble believing that that's true, because over time, if you're only shooting a certain group of deer, the other ones are going to repopulate. So that's a whole nother story. We can get into the genetics that make up big bucks some other time. This is just to show why antler point restrictions don't work. So as you go down the line, this is a beautiful deer. He's a trophy from here on out by most people's standards. And this buck, he's not really a trophy until, maybe down there at 5-AF. 6-AF, definitely I would call him a trophy. And the difference between these two deers is summarized in that this deer up here always has more points. Maybe not more inches, but definitely more points. Maybe a smaller frame, smaller body deer early on, but more points and possibly more inches. Probably more inches because he has more points. I mean, he definitely has more inches here. And this deer down here, buck 2, his story is he's a big frame deer. He's just a big body, but he doesn't put on points or antlers really. So he's a big body deer. He's just big stocky guy. Big guy. He puts a lot of energy into putting on meat and not a whole lot of energy to putting on antler. And those are the two main differences that come down the line. And the reason antler point restrictions don't work as intended is because everybody wants the 30-pointer down here. Everybody wants that deer, but this deer is legal to shoot right here. He's legal to shoot, even in the most restricted antler points in Michigan here. He's legal to shoot at a 2.5, at a 1.5 years old. But this is the guy who's not legal to shoot until at least a 5.5. He's 4.5 before he's legal to shoot because he doesn't put on points. So you get this guy down here breeding 3 extra years before he's a legal deer. And this guy doesn't get to spread his genes maybe once to one doe. Like, it depends on when you get him in the fall. So everything from right here on doesn't exist in antler point restrictions. Because when you're hunting high pressure situations, like most places in Michigan, hunters who put a lot of time and effort into hunting are going to take the first legal deer. And nothing against anyone that shoots that deer, because that's a nice deer. Like, I don't mind people shooting this deer, but we'll get into that later. The point is this guy doesn't make it. This guy never makes it to even there. And this guy legally can't be shot until here in the stiffest 4 points on one side restriction. So he gets the 2 extra deers, and these are the types of deer that we see most of in Michigan, because that's the type that the antler point restriction keeps around. So antler point restrictions would work if it was something crazy, like 20 points on a side, and you would get the big deer. Like that. If I don't advocate for that at all. I don't think we should have any antler point restrictions. I'm saying that if you wanted antler point restrictions to work as everybody imagines them, you have to put a massive, massive amount of antler points. Like, it's got to be 15 to 20 on a side if you want those big, huge deer. Because otherwise, they just won't get there. I mean, this guy's legal, that guy's legal. Or you would have an antler point minimum, and you would say anything under 3 and under, you could shoot those deer, and that would leave the bigger ones to grow. But I don't advocate that at all either. So if you take the mindset of a typical hunter, like me, if I'm spending a lot of time, well, let's put it this way. If I'm spending a lot of money and I don't have a lot of time, I'm going to take the first legal buck that I can shoot, which would be this deer or that one. I mean, I prefer that one because that one's a way bigger deer, way better deer. But this one's a legal deer. And in high pressure hunting, the mindset is if I don't shoot it, my neighbor's going to. Someone else is going to get him because this is my opportunity to get a legal deer. But if you remove the antler point restriction, suddenly it's independent hunters, which is ultimately what it's going to come down to. If we want to hunt those caliber of 5 and 6.5 deer, it's going to take disciplined hunters passing these deer up here. That's all there is to it. It's that simple. You're going to take disciplined hunters to get bigger deer, whether you have antler point restrictions or not. But without the antler point restrictions, suddenly they're free to shoot the first forkhorn that comes along, or maybe the first little 6-point that comes along. They aren't restricted to shooting these younger deer that are also easier to hunt. You see way more of them, which I think gives the opportunity to fill more tags on younger deer and let those mature or more mature deer through until they get to the real trophy class. You just want to shoot a better deer than you shot last year. And I think that's a typical mindset of at least Americans in general, but hunters also. I mean, there are some hunters out there who are satisfied shooting a spike, and that's perfectly fine. Go ahead. That doesn't hurt me. That doesn't hurt my feelings. I think you have the right to shoot a spike if you want. But at some point, a serious hunter will say, especially in Michigan where there's plenty of does, if you're just meat hunting, there's plenty of does to shoot. In most places. The wolves, don't get me started on the wolves, that's a whole other problem. But eventually, I think any serious hunter is going to get tired of shooting spikes, shooting young deer. So they're going to say, I want to do better than that, and I want to do better than that. And I think if you remove the antler point restriction, you remove that big brother government telling you how to hunt.
What are your true feelings towards Big Brother? hate him.
And individuals can be more empowered to actually hunt the deer they want to hunt and hunt the way they want to hunt. And I think management of deer was way better back when there were fewer rules. I mean, back in the heyday in Michigan, big bucks were plentiful for a few reasons, but they didn't have regulations regulating them either. I mean, there's a whole lot of reasons why they had a lot of big bucks in Michigan that may not be related to regulations, but they didn't need the regulations. Hunters just hunted the way they saw fit, and it ended up with big bucks. Imagine that. The government didn't have to tell you how to hunt your deer.
Oh, Jim the Cricket.
You could just choose. Yeah, that's a novel fact today, and it's sad. But at the end of the day, we all want to shoot these caliber of deer. Like, even he's a good trophy, but these are the deer we all want to shoot. But with antler point restrictions, you don't see this deer ever again. And this deer sticks around longer. So you see more low quality deer longer. They're around more because this guy never makes it past his first year. Well, to his third fall, past his second year. And that's why antler point restrictions don't function like everybody thinks they do. He dead, he lives. And that's what type of deer we see. I mean, everybody sees these types of deer because he's dead. Antler point restrictions made that happen. I know I'll probably get a whole lot of angry comments.
Well, you think what you want about me. I'm not changing. I like me.
But I hope some happy ones too. And I hope, let's put it this way, I actually hope to get some constructive comments because I don't think about it all. I sit here in the tree stand and think about how to make hunting better, and I miss things, and I like your opinion. Your opinion never falls on deaf ears, whether you call it negative or positive or whatever. I appreciate them all. So thank you. Please comment. Let me know. Give us a thumbs up if you love talking about this type of stuff. And subscribe for more. There'll be more coming. And they always tell you to hit the little notification bell, so I'll tell you to do that too. Share us with your friends. Ask them what they think about my thoughts on antler point restrictions and why they don't work. I definitely, you remember Fatty? That buck we were hunting? That's the other buck that inspired this, because he was big, huge, fat deer. That deer was fun. And we never actually saw him on the hoof. I had pictures of him. Those two deer. I think they were the same year too. The artwork credit goes to my wife and editor. She's very good. I did not draw this. I made the grid. I made the boxes. She drew the deer. She did good. She just whipped it together real quick and was like, all right,